Jodi Grubbs fell headlong into the endless rush and exhaustion of hustle culture. After leaving her childhood home on the island of Bonaire in the Caribbean, she had assumed the rapid pace and stress of city living in the States. Soon, she realized God was bidding her to return to the island time of her past. In time, Jodi found sanctuary and ways to care for her soul by making space for God, others, and herself. Evoking the contentment she once had in the gentle rhythms of Bonaire, she learned of another path, a path away from burnout and toward restoration. And she invites you, too, to grasp a sustainable approach to life anchored by the forced pauses of spiritual practices and an open-handedness before God. Begin to rest and let go of the need to keep up as you learn to live slowly. Welcome to the Unhurried Living Podcast. You want to prioritize your own soul care and self-care, but you don't know where to begin. You don't believe you have the time, and you feel stuck, overwhelmed, or even distracted. Well, I'm inviting you to join our community of women in Replenish. Replenish is coaching, training, and community to help you live a more sustainably paced and productive life. You can confidently engage a life of transformation with the ongoing support of experienced coaches and mentors, real connection, ongoing support, lasting change. Join us now in Replenish by going to unhurriedliving.com/replenish. The beach has long been a place of rest and refreshment for me. Sand, palm trees, driftwood, crashing waves, and flip-flops are all part of my regular rhythm of life. Jodi's island theme is the perfect setting for intentional soul care amid pressing cultural dynamics. I trust Jodi because she has lived a with God life smack in the middle of unimaginable loss. She is uniquely capable of journeying with us as we learn to slow to the pace of an ocean wave. Jodi is a reliable friend accompanying you on your journey towards slowness of heart, soul, and mind. Jodi Grubbs is the podcast host of Our Island in the City and a slow living advocate. She's the author of a children's book, The Island Adventures of Lili and Oliver, and co-author of a Bible study called The Friendship Café. Jodi, her husband Dean, and their daughter Lili live outside Raleigh, North Carolina. Enjoy my conversation with Jodi. Well, Jodi, thank you so much for joining us here on the Unhurried Living Podcast. I'm so glad you've joined us.
Thank you, Jem. I've been looking forward to our conversation. I'm so glad to be here with you.
I know, it's so good. And I have it right here. I should have had it out beforehand. We're talking today about live slowly. I love this. It's got the palm fronds. I live in the land of palm fronds. So we are going to talk about the ocean. I'm sure we're going to get to that for sure, because we're kindred spirits in that way. But I kind of just wanted to start the conversation right where you do in the book, with sort of really a tragedy in your life that compelled you into the space you're in. So I was wondering if you could just start right there with your story.
Sure, Jem. So yes, I was widowed back when I was 29 years old. And 25 years ago, my husband, Brian, was in just a horrific accident due to some people slowing down and some people not slowing down, and some road rage. And so that shifted my life. He should have died, and he didn't. And he had a long recovery, a lot of trauma. And then 2 years later, he was almost completely better, and he did pass away. I was by his side. And so that's where I started the book, was talking about seasons where slowing down is chosen for us. Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. And it's happening to a lot of people these days. I know that we're now 4 years past COVID, but that was sort of an unchosen thing that's very semi-recent. Yes. That unchosen slowing, there are a lot of people who are listening who are probably suffering in any number of ways, relationally or physically or emotionally. What's maybe one thing maybe go further in that. What propelled you into this space, which now you're calling Live Slowly, through your pain? How did you end up there?
Yeah. So, we we had to stop everything in life.
Yeah.
Literally, everything came to a halt, and then I had to shift everything I was doing as life seemed to get better. And then when he died, I had to stop again. And so that caused me to also think back to times when I was younger. I lived on an island. We had an island pace, and my soul was just crying out for a more sustainable pace, a quieter life than what we would find on I-85 in Atlanta, where this accident happened. Yes. So it led me to different years after that of having to go back and relearn it. I wish I could say that was it. I've been doing slow living for the last 25 years, but I've had seasons. Like when my daughter I got remarried. And so when my daughter was a little girl, I would just run the roads with her, doing all the things that I thought you're supposed to do with a preschooler. And our bodies both were like, nope, we're tired. This isn't what we know. And so I would get sick. And my doctor's the one, Jem, that had to tell me, you've got to slow down. All the things you're doing, even your church volunteering, your body is saying no. So go back to the way you've always known. Yeah. So that was a tough pill to swallow. But I did. I had to say, Jodi, you know better. When we don't know better, that's one thing. But when we know better, we can rely on what we've used before, right?
So true. It's so true. Well, even in both of just the brief stories you've shared so far, in the first one, there's grief, which slows you down. And in a way, that's your body. Your body is going through something that is forcing the issue. And then your body's speaking up again. I think that's something I've been journeying with is my body now tells me when I'm doing too much or maybe doing something in a way that doesn't work for me anymore. Are you finding that as well?
Absolutely. If I had just understood that years ago, I think if I could have learned to listen to both this, the still small voice of God and the voice of my body, I would have probably paid a little bit more attention and been kinder to myself, but also, I just, I didn't know, and now I do, right? And so I'm listening. I'll just say I'm listening, Jem.
I know. Well, we hear, at Unhurried Living, we talk about that word unhurried. You're talking about the word living slow. But there's something about that we always want to say it's not laziness. It's not like this laissez-faire, laid back. There's really great intentionality about choosing to live at a pace where you could hear your body. And as you said, the still small voice of God. Right? There's a pacing to that. You used a couple of words in your book. One of the words was capacity, which we can talk about more. I love these two words. And the word pacing. These are amazing formational words. So can you talk about capacity and pacing?
Sure. So with capacity, and some of this I learned from my friend Andy Kolber, who you know. She talks a lot about capacity, and capacity is just this idea that, so I'm visual. And so for your listeners and your viewers, if we can think of a tiny scallop shell, that's a tiny bit of capacity. Half of a coconut is a little bit smaller. Half a jug of a margarita, let's say, or a lemonade is medium. And then a big pail of sand at the beach is large. So if you can start out thinking about the levels of capacity that we have, how much can you hold? How much can your mind hold, your body hold, your spirit? What's your soul saying as far as I have room to carry this right now, or I don't have space to carry this right now? So that's, examining what's pressuring us helps us look back at our capacity and say, what's the pace I need to go at with what I can hold right now.
I love those images. They're just so organic. I mean, a bucket it's man-made, but the organic nature, of a coconut and a shell and of course a margarita bottle. or tequila, whatever. And then the bucket. That I'm a visual person, so that really helps me too. And it strikes me that we might have different capacities in different areas of our lives at the same time. Yeah, talk about that. How do you maneuver when you're feeling very small in one place, and how does that affect the other areas?
Right. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? We can learn how to hold the both and of a situation. So, for instance, if you're a young mom right now and you think, I just don't have the capacity to, work in the church nursery right now. I have 2 little ones at home. I'm just exhausted. Then you can say no to that. I'm sorry, I don't have the capacity. But there might be another situation where you do have the capacity to sit with a neighbor, in their suffering. And it will take a different kind of energy than if you're running around for 2 hours in the church nursery. But you might decide, I can do these 2 things in 1 week. Like I can say no to one and yes to the other. I don't have to say no to everything.
Right. Yeah, that takes, again, some self-awareness. And I've noticed I don't know, I just use the word energy, not like I have energy to move my body or to make a decision or to think or to do a thing. And when I'm talking about noticing my body, I'm also talking about noticing the energy levels. Right.
Yeah.
And you can have emotional energy towards something or physical energy towards something, but I think that has a lot to do with capacity as well. And I've been treating myself a little more gracious as time goes on and honoring that. Even if I have a little bit of negative self-talk at the time, like, well, you should be able, you should have more capacity for this, I want to guilt myself or whatever. But over the course, especially of the last decade, I've just come to terms with honoring what's happening in the energies of my life, whether, again, it's emotional, physical. If we have capacity, which is our ability to hold, you had small, medium, large, bigger. What about pacing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So pacing, I find that so many of us want to just rush ahead, whether we're rushing ahead of God, whether we're rushing ahead of our own self, and we're just not ready. Everyone has a different pace. And I think that there's this sense of shame sometimes if you're not going fast. Some of us are made to go fast. Some of us are not. But you and Ellen talk about the pace of grace. And pacing is just so important to look at your situation and decide, how fast do I go? How slow do I go? When? Why? So pacing and capacity do go hand in hand in a way. You have to know your capacity to know if you should slow your pace, right?
And sometimes you're right. We need to pick up our pace. It depends on who we are and what's going on. Sometimes it's like, get moving. Yeah. This area needs attention, right? Again, there's an intentionality here. So I wonder, like as a spiritual director, I would say then some good questions for ourselves might be, what is your capacity in this particular area for you right now? You could ask that of multiple areas of your life, but you could also ask yourself, what do I feel globally about my life? What's my capacity right now? And just see what comes up. And then follow-up question to that, I think would be good, is what pace do I need to adopt in order to make the adjustments that I need to make for my different capacities? I think you could make some real headway with that. Yeah,
absolutely. Good questions to ask. We have to ask ourselves these things. Otherwise, we're just in this place of moving forward without really knowing why. And then we get burnt out because we just do the next thing without checking with ourselves, not just checking our calendar, but checking in with ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so easy. You're right. I mean, that's what the busyness and the blur does, right? It kind of keeps you blinded to what's actually going on. And then you get, months or a year down the line. And it's like, when you're driving a car and your mind is thinking about something and you're at the store and you don't remember like getting there, like all the stoplights.
Right.
Which is a scary thing.
I've done that. Yes.
But I think we can do that in our lives. Don't you think we can do that sometimes in our lives?
We do all the time.
Yeah. Well, let's circle back to the beach here. I live in Southern California, and I can get to our favorite beach town is Laguna Beach, and we can be there within about 20, 25 minutes. And so, I live in Southern California, so there's palm trees, and I know that you're an island girl, so we've always really bonded over that. Just the beauty of what the ocean air feels like and the sand between our toes. But not everybody lives at the beach, right? So I'm wondering, and someone's listening, easy for you to say you can just go there. But I mean, just even taking it as a metaphor, I'd love to hear what your thoughts on, the island posture or an ocean posture, how might that help us?
Right. So one thing I talk about when I help people through a little bit of coaching, of slowing down, or if they're going through anxiety, I always say, where's your island in the city? So it just gives you this idea of where's your quiet soul care sanctuary in a busy world. And the beach is the perfect example. So, the salty ocean air, it hits you, it awakens you. You've got the soft sand under your feet, which is for grounding and centering. All the wildlife. The water, of course, so many metaphors with the water, with the tide coming in and going back out again, and the rhythms and the waves. So I think finding a way to bring yourself back to an island experience, if you've ever been on an island or been on a vacation or a place in nature, you can go back there in your mind again. So I go back to my yellow raft anchored outside of the reef many times when I am in a stressful situation or just need to quiet my soul. And I live an hour and a half from the beach right now, so I can't just run to the beach. I have to bring the beach with me in my mind.
For sure. I remember once my therapist was teaching, he had a practice called just self-forgetfulness, which he said can help you when you're anxious. And to me, one of the easiest places to become self-forgetful is at the beach, because basically to become self-forgetful, it's what the list you just made, which is if you can get all of your senses enacted at one time, then it automatically sends you to another place where you don't feel the stress as much. So like you said, the sand beneath your feet and the smell of the salt water, or even the taste of it on your lips, right? Everything you're seeing.
Yeah.
Right. And so many of your senses as you can get engaged, actually it's the way God has made us. Our bodies can then naturally relax. And so I've even done that practice in a beautiful bookstore. You can go in there if they're burning a candle, if they're playing music, you're seeing things, you're smelling things, you're hearing things. And that sense of self-forgetfulness takes over. And I love that practice.
Yes, I'll have to remember that word. That is perfect. What do you like most about the beach when you first get there? Like, just what hits you the most?
Yeah. My husband and I always talk about this because we drive in the car and there's this corner that you turn to, and you're in the city. We come through a canyon to get to the beach town. And when you turn, you can just see just a little bit of the blue water. Just enough, like down the street, and there's the ocean. And even just seeing the water, we've commented on this multiple times, just starts to relax. So I love the sight of the big blue expanse. It makes me feel small in a really good way, and then I just love the air. I love the air at the ocean. It smells different. It feels different.
Right.
And so, I mean, there's I could make you a big list about the ocean. I really could, but I mean,
yes.
It's just one of my favorite places. But those two, seeing the water, that first blush of seeing the blue. And then once I get out there on the bluffs, there's a bluff in the city we go to. So you can go down in the sand as well. There's also a bluff that has a sidewalk. And so you can walk and just enjoy the sky and the water and the landscaping. It's just gorgeous.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds lovely. That's your exhale. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. I can relax automatically there. That's what I love about it. And again, we're going on and on about the beach. It might be something else to other people. I think it's important, though, to know what your place to exhale is and get yourself there.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I think so. It's part of slowing down for sure. Yeah, a friend of mine said she can't always go places physically. So she goes in her mind, and she had this beautiful trip with her father when she was 12, and they went fishing way out in the Pacific Northwest. I'm in Raleigh right now. So for me, that's way out, but closer to you. And just hearing the rapids and the wind and the water, very different than the beach, but she goes back to that place in her mind when she needs to. Yeah.
So good. It's so good. And we have access to so many things these days. For example, like on YouTube, so many nature videos are out there. And I heard somewhere once, I think it was on Simon Sinek, he was talking about how what's the generosity or compassion that one person grants to another, that does something to both people when you're connected, right? But also the act of watching someone be compassionate to someone else can affect you deeply in the same way. So you don't even have to be doing it. You can be seeing it. Wow. And I know, isn't that amazing the way we're just created to. Yeah. So if you've seen that, if you've ever seen, I know, whatever, call me what you will, but I do like to sometimes get lost on those YouTube videos where there's so many things on there. But one of the things I love is there's a lot of slow living people on there. There's a lot of nature people on there. I've got those background where like a waterfall is falling and music is playing. I like to have that going. So all that to say, I like to transfer that idea of if you can watch compassion, it affects you. And like your friend, she can see it in her mind's eye, but we do have access now. You can find any number of beautiful things to see. And I'm wondering if it would also just affect you the same way if you could find an ocean on a video and hear the waves coming in. If that could be, you could capture 5 minutes on a day and sense God's presence in the sound of the waves and just have that same sensation. I think there's a lot of creativity and variety here.
I think so. I ran across a small podcast a year ago. I don't know the name, but you can just Google Rain on Tin Roof.
Oh, yeah.
And it was mesmerizing. It just transported me to a different place.
Yes. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Yes.
I do.
There's so many like that. They've got them in the rainforest and you can listen to rivers and waterfalls and ocean waves. There's so many. Anyway, so I don't know. This is turning into a practical tips for how to get relaxed when you can't get to the beach. But maybe that's a good thing. Yeah, maybe that's a good thing. Well, Unhurried Living, we work with a lot of leaders around the world who listen to our podcast. So I wonder if we could take this message and for a minute, just specifically talk about Christian leadership. What would be a word that you would have for Christian leaders, especially in this idea of capacity? What was the other word? My brain, pacing. My brain, forgive my brain. Capacity and pacing. But also, is there a practice or two other than the ones that we've mentioned that you think might be good for them to try in the middle of the day?
Yeah, my book has 18 slow living practices in it. Yeah. One of the ones is just acceptance. I think that, we feel like we have so much control and we don't, right? And so I'm learning as I get older, the practice of accepting where I'm at, my capacity, how fast I can go, if I have to say no, if I have to pause. It just helps me be okay with it and not beat myself up. And so in leadership, it's very hard not to see what other people are doing or feel like you've got to always be at the front or the head of everything. And there's a way to model that by just being where you really are and accepting the reality of that as we mirror that back to each other, So that's a big one for me. A newer one for me, I should say.
So noticing where you are and also accepting kind of where you are and who you are right now.
Yes, that acceptance gives you that exhale, and just saying, this is the reality of where I'm at. It could be emotionally, it could be physically, that this is just where you're at right now. Right. And we can all lead in a posture that honors ourselves and honors those around us. Yeah, because people are really hurting these days in so many ways. It has to be compassion And honoring each other, I think, has to go hand in hand with capacity and pacing. We have to be fully present with people. That's the other one when you say to just being present. I have had so much healing in the last year, just having someone face to face at coffee hear me, or just even if they don't have an answer for something I'm going through, just to make space for that. And about that with spiritual direction and soul care. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. Presence is really underestimated and probably undervalued. It is a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah. When we can slow down to be present to ourselves and others and God, it changes everything. But we have to slow down to do that. Otherwise we're just racing past everybody and everything.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, it's good to know that there are 18 practices in this book. That's just another reason to pick it up, because people can read them and try on some maybe new ways to connect with God and themselves that they haven't tried before. So that'd be amazing. There's another phrase that you use, which I really love, and it's the phrase, I am held, in relation to Jesus. I'm wondering if you could unpack that idea for us as well. How does that help you, and how would it help others?
Sure. Well, I end my book with the last chapter talks about believing that we're truly held by God. And it took almost 23 years for me to work through that to where I could say that. So this is not a fast thing, right? But trusting that we're held by our Heavenly Father. We all want to be seen. We all want to be heard. We want to know we matter. And being held is just a way of, I would say also just letting yourself go. It's part of letting go is trusting that we're held by God. And so we have to slow down to be vulnerable, to be held by God. And also by others. I think sometimes God puts others in our path to hold our arms up when we are weary, or to hold our hand, or just to hold space. And so this idea of being held has gotten bigger and bigger for me in different ways. So it can go from being swaddled tightly as a baby, being held in your mother's arms, all the way to being held by Christ, and trusting that we are held. Because if we don't believe it, I found it was okay to say, well, I believe in God and I believe He's good and He loves me. But my big reason not wanting to slow down in life was I didn't want to deal with the hard things with God.
Yeah.
And that you have to get to a point where you just say, God, you're holding me. I'm held. And so I'm secure. So I can exhale and let the work be done. Yeah.
So good. Yeah, you're raising so many beautiful sort of spiritual direction themed / spiritual formation themed ideas. And another question I think we could ask ourselves is, how do I feel held by God? And maybe the other question is, how do I not feel held? And you were talking before about acceptance, knowing where we are. I think asking questions like this on these themes can help you determine where you are. And especially if you already have a spiritual director, these are the kinds of questions you can talk over with your director when you meet. And if you don't have one, get one. I think everybody should be in spiritual direction, because to have someone just with bated breath, just listening to your every word, it's amazing. But
it is. Yeah. My spiritual director is amazing. And she always ends with, well, what is God inviting you to?
That's the most amazing question ever. You could ask yourself that every single day.
Every day.
For sure. Well, I want to come back around to just this idea of the word live slowly is the name of your book. We've also used the phrase slow down. Now I'm picturing in my mind, there are people out there, a couple kinds of people. One of them is like, that's impossible. How could I possibly slow down? You don't know the life I'm living. So there's that person. Another kind of person might be someone And this one would take a little bit more self-awareness, but maybe they're just afraid. And so sometimes when we're afraid to see what's going on, we do keep ourselves busy. So, Myrna, can you speak to both of those people? So the person that's afraid to slow down enough to see what's going on because they're afraid of what they'll find, but also the person who thinks they literally don't have enough time, which I don't believe. I think everybody can make time, but I've made my way to that belief. So talk to that person too. You see the two people I'm talking about?
Right, right. For years, I was the person that was afraid to slow down because I just didn't want to go to some of these hard things. Like, why would my husband die? These types of things. Why is there pain and suffering, God? And so I would just busy myself with everything I could think of so I didn't have to go there. And now I would pose the question, is the pain that you're in by not going there, is it greater than the risk of going there?
Yeah.
Because we don't know that it's going to be even more painful to go there. What if there's freedom, right? And you and I know now there is freedom. But I think going back to being held by God, trust that you are held in this tension of wanting to go fast so I don't have to feel the pain. It's what are we afraid we're going to find when we slow down, right? Because things come to the surface. If you go away for 2 days and it's quiet, your mind and body is going to bring some things up. Like, okay, is it time now? Can we talk? It's very scary to not know what is coming. And then on the flip side, I know many people who are saying, I can't slow down. But what is it that you're missing out on? Are you missing out on more by not slowing down than if you would slow down?
Yeah.
And that is usually the case. If someone just takes a little bit of time, they'll say, yeah, you're right. So it's really also in your values. What are your core values in life? If you go back to that, if you're reaching all of them, then you might have a lot of capacity in your life and a lot of energy. But if you're not, I would say start there and just say, are there people I'm not spending the time with, whether it's a grandchild or a parent or a best friend that your soul is really wanting to connect with, but you're just doing so many other things. So it's like you said before, it's not, we're just sitting on the couch eating bonbons. It's, what am I saying yes to that's taking me away from what my soul really wants to be doing and needs to be doing? Yeah. Busy is different than being hurried, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what we say. You can be busy and unhurried.
Yeah.
And that it takes time. That's definitely a process. It's a matter of believing in a way of life that takes time. So, but thank you for those practical encouragements in those areas. I'm wondering if there's anything else that you would want to say on your theme or from your book that you would want us to hear that we didn't talk about yet.
Sure. One thing I noticed after COVID started maybe easing up, we had a lot of pain associated with that time, but I'd be talking to different women and they'd say, Jodi, I don't know if I really want to go back to that busy lifestyle. I don't know if I want to go back to that schedule. What if I was never made for that? What if that's not even who I am? And I would say, then you don't have to. I give you permission. So I just want to say to the person watching or listening, you have permission to slow down and find a more sustainable pace for your life, because I feel like it's our divine right as humans to pick the pace that works best for our season of life and not have it dictated to us by our culture and by other institutions and, people. It's kind of like, who is telling you can't slow down? Is it somebody or something, or is it a little voice inside of you?
Sure. Thank you, Jodi, so much. It is so true. We do have more agency than we think, and we do get to choose the life we're living. I know that there's a lot of different circumstances in people's lives out there that, yes, there are some things that you can't just maneuver around. But for most of us, there's at least something we can do to help ease the stress. And just become aware of that. Ask some of the questions that we've already talked about during this conversation and see what arises for you. See what God has for you in the questions. So, well, I'm wondering then, Jodi, can you tell us how we can find you online? Do you have a website where if people wanted to connect with you, they could?
Sure. I'm at Jodi Grubbs. That's just JODIGRUBBS.com. And pretty much everything you would need to find is right there. And then I do like to hang out on Instagram, which is jodi.grubbs.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think we follow each other. That's always fun to find friends that way. So find Jodi on Instagram and check out her website. And then, of course, get her book. It's called Live Slowly, A Gentle Invitation to Exhale. Don't you want to do that? Of course you do. So go get it. Thank you, Jodi, so much for being with us today. I always enjoy when we get to talk with each other.
Thank you, Jem. I appreciate it. And thank you also for endorsing Live Slowly.
Oh, yeah.
Your
That's fun to do.
In the book. Yeah, I just appreciate it so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks. Thank you for joining me on the Unhurried Living podcast. Remember, you're making your way forward one small, simple, and gracious step at a time.